Welcome. Thanks for joining us. We're going to be getting started in a couple of minutes. And the link to the slides is on this very first slide. So if you would like to follow along with the slides or have a copy of the slides to look at later, that link is on the slide for you, codehs.com/CSA Exam-slides. Welcome, welcome. Hello, everyone. Oh, I see a lot of familiar people. Hello, Eric, Danielle, Bianca, welcome. Hello, everyone. If you would like to type your introduction into the chat so we can get to know everyone who's in here while we're waiting just a minute, that would be awesome. And while you guys are typing into the chat, I will tell you a little bit about me. My name is Robin Leslie. I am a professional development specialist for Code HS. I taught high school in Indiana for 15 years and taught business, computer science, digital design, web design, all sorts of good stuff. As a business teacher in Indiana, you can teach everything apparently. So I did. And now I work for Code HS. I use Code HS in my classroom. I used the free version because we couldn't get the pro version, but if you can, definitely do it. It is super awesome. Hello, Eric, Manuel, Troy, Arizona, California, Philly. Nice, nice. Welcome. All right, about 30 more seconds and we're going to get started. If you would like the slides, the link to the slides is on this very first slide for you. You can type that in to your search bar and get access to the slides. But you don't have to look at the slides if you don't want to. You can just follow along with us, and I will put any links that you might need into the chat. Karina from Texas, Denise, Pennsylvania. Very nice, very nice. Well, thank you very much for coming. We are going to go ahead and get started quickly. This is preparing students for the AP CSA exam. Fun, fun, fun. And then we have our amazing teacher trainer here to give you all of the information you will need, Chip Kramlich. Everyone welcome, Chip.
Hi, everybody. Let me go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Chip Kramlich. I currently teach in Fayetteville, Georgia. We're just outside of Atlanta. I've been teaching computer science for about 13 years, been using Code HS for most of that time. We've been at our school on the pro for quite a while, so definitely well versed with this. I've been teaching AP CSA specifically for about 10 years. I'm not a reader for CSA, but I have been one for CSP. But before I became a teacher, I actually worked in industry. I was a software developer and a systems analyst, so well versed in the whole computer area. Okay, so here's our agenda for today. We're going to do our welcome and introductions, which we've pretty much done. We'll talk a little bit about the AP CSA test format. We'll go over some available resources that CodeHS provides. We'll do a review of strategies and then do a QA and webinar wrap up. Okay, so again, we are using Zoom. So if you have any questions, just go to the Q&A. You could put your questions there. You can also put some in the chat. Robin will keep an eye out for that. If there is something, she'll let me know if we need to actually pause to answer some questions. So we'll go ahead and start rolling on. Okay. You do need a Code HS account. So if you can, please go ahead, follow the link there. Robin will post it in the chat. So codehs.com/signup. Specifically, if you want to look at some of the resources that we'll be covering. CodeHS does a wonderful job on getting students resources specifically for reviewing for the actual test. Okay, I'll leave this up just for a few more seconds so you guys have it. Okay. So what is CodeHS? it is definitely a comprehensive platform, as it says here, for teaching computer science for middle and high schools. And just as a user, let me go ahead and I'm not paid to say what I'm saying now, but they do an excellent job of actually getting feedback from teachers and expanding and updating their curriculum. I've used other curricula before, like code.org and a few others where their platforms are pretty much static. They pretty much make just a few changes. But again, Code HS, especially for our district, has been very helpful. And if we wanted to change, me being a teacher trainer, they've actually gone in and implemented some of the items they actually have. So this is a system platform that is always changing. That's the good thing. Okay, so again, comprehensive platform. The nice thing is that instant feedback and submissions. The auto grader, where the students' work is automatically graded, they can get feedback from it. It will tell them where the issues are, how many the tests that pass, what are some possible issues. This is all web-based. Students can work on Chromebooks, PCs, MacBooks, whatever. This is the nice thing because our students use Chromebooks outside of class. In my class, we actually have PCs, so if they don't get assignments done, they can then work it on their Chromebooks and everything's there. And with the free version, the nice thing is students can still all do this and do everything. There's no additional materials needed. So as long as your school system doesn't block Code HS by itself, should be good to go. Okay, so let's look at the actual AP exam. The AP exam is broken down into two specific parts. Now, the test will actually be given on May 8th. It is an afternoon test. If you are new to AP testing, AP typically does 2 tests per day. Computer science tests are typically in the afternoon. So just go ahead and mark your calendar for May 8th at 12 p.m. And that is local time. So the AP exam, now, just from what I've gathered, this year it's still going to be a paper exam, but College Board is moving to move the tests to be digital. I know CS Principals is already offered as a digital. We'll be taking digital at our school, but our CSA will still be paper. Now, there's 2 parts of the test. The first part is the multiple choice part. It is 50% of the score, and students have an hour and 30 minutes. One of the things with this, I tell my students is there'll be some questions they can answer within a few seconds, some that are going to take a little bit longer, but pretty much on average, they've got about 2 minutes and 15 seconds per question. So if something that they can rush in, they can always, skip a question and come back to it and go from there. The second part is the free response, and that's something we'll probably talk a little bit more about today. There's only 4 questions, still get that 90 minutes of time, and again, it's half the exam. Now, again, 40 minutes or 40 questions is an hour and a half, and it's 50% of the score. Topics include, again, the programming fundamentals. What we're talking about there is if statements, for loops, variables, some basic stuff with class uses of classes. We've got data structures, logic, algorithms, problem solving, object-oriented programming, and recursion. Now, a breakdown of this actually comes from the CED. So if you have a CED, you'll actually get these same numbers. You can get them directly from the College Board website also. You'll notice some of these things are, very small percentage. Like if you think primitive types, it's only 2.5 to 5% per overall. That's questions that only deal with primitive types. Some of these other ones are actually embedded in there. So in other words, you'll still have primitive types in most of the other questions. You just won't have questions dealing strictly with primitive types. But some of the biggest areas are Unit 3, Unit 4, where you're talking if statements and looping. And if we see here, if statements being 15 to 17.5%, is a huge chunk. So definitely focus on that. I will say with Java, when you are reviewing if statements, please make sure your students understand the difference between a double equals and the dot equals method. If they're talking primitive types, they're going to use double equals. If they're talking a reference or object types, they need to use the dot equals method. Just to make sure they're doing it. That's going to more on the FRQ side, but this way they understand what they're actually looking at. Now, looking back at the FRQ part, you have 4 questions. Now, questions are typically broken up into multiple parts. You got an hour and a half, and again, it's 50%. Uh, this is typically how they do it. You always have a question dealing with methods and control structures. So just, writing some basic methods. You have one dealing with classes, one dealing with arrays and array lists, and another dealing with 2D arrays. So if you're like me, you probably spent most of this semester so far on array lists, and 2D arrays, and that's pretty much half the test on the FRQ side. Now, on the exam tips for multiple choice, definitely inform your students they need to use the scratch paper. I believe the test booklet is scratch paper. They need to read through the code. And again, if you think about programming, many of you probably already know this. Programming, when you're teaching it, it's a form of literacy. You're teaching students to read and write code. And this test is pretty much a 2-part test. The multiple choice portion is reading code, reading and understanding code. And the FRQ is the actual writing code segment. So here we're trying to teach them to understand, to follow. One of the things I've spent a lot of the year on, and right now it's just within the past few weeks, my students are finally agreeing with me, is when you're actually reading code, going through multiple choice questions, you want to trace your code. I typically will do a T-chart, my variable names across the top, and then underneath, we use the paper as the computer's memory, and we just change the variables over time as we go through it. They're just now starting to realize how helpful that actually is, even though we've been doing it for most of a year. Most of them think they can do it in their head. And as I've explained to my students multiple times, your brain makes mistakes. That's why you need paper. You can keep track of it. Your brain can't keep track of a lot of data all at once. And that's where the whole thing of using scratch paper is definitely going to help. Definitely try to get them to focus on how to go through iteration when you're actually tracing through it. Make sure they're showing which iteration in the loop there actually are. So keeping track of the loop variables, specifically I or whatever. If it's a while loop, maybe just have a little side note, which loop or which iteration through the loop are they actually on? There's typical multiple choice questions that will ask at this point, what does the array look like after 3 iterations? So they may have to keep track of how many iterations have actually occurred in order to actually answer the question. A key thing also is most of these multiple choice questions can be answered fairly quickly when they're actually tracing through code. If they're going through a loop, they don't have to actually go through the complete whole process of looping. As they're going through, they can just start looking at what is either being printed or how your array is changed. And from there, they can actually look at answers and start eliminating answers. When I walk through my students with some of this, I'll show them. It's like, we'll only get like maybe through the second or third iteration. First iteration, it may be like, okay, the first number is going to be a 4. So let's eliminate everything that doesn't start with 4. Next time through, okay, now we're at -2. Which ones have -2? And by that point, we may be down to just 1 or 2 answers. We have to just go a little farther. But typically, they don't have to complete the full code trace. They can just go part of the way through. Other things with like if statements and things like that, they need to double check if it's an if else or just if and if. Make sure they understand if you have multiple if statements, that each if statement is going to get executed. While if you have an if and then another if embedded with an else, so you have an else if, it's going to skip the other if it's part of an else. So key things to actually look at as they're actually going through the multiple choice portion. Know how to use all your methods on the Java quick reference sheet. Again, I give mine a reference sheet at the beginning of the year. I tell them you can use it on every test. They have to keep up with it. But again, it's making sure they know what it is. A lot of times on a test, they'll ask like, what's this? I said, where's your reference sheet? Look it up. On the reference sheet, they need to be aware that there are a few methods that are overloaded, specifically in the string class. So they need to understand how each one works. They need to know how to quickly access those methods for the string class, for the array list class, so they can more easily understand what the actual question is asking. So at this point, I will pause a second. Do you guys have any questions for multiple choice question tips? We good?
Nothing yet, nothing in the Q&A and nothing in the chat yet, but I'll let you know if something pops up.
Okay. Well, if I'm going too fast, definitely slow me down. Okay. FRQs, the bane of every student taking CSA. They absolutely hate FRQs. But there are some key things you need to do is definitely, and it's getting them that first bullet point there is an issue we've had since COVID, getting them to read through the whole thing. If you've ever taught close reading, it's almost like you want to do that during your review section. Just look up close reading where they actually have to go through, read it once, read it through a second time to come up with the key points, and then read it a third time just to actually be able to answer everything. I always tell them to skip that first block at the top, which is just kind of the best way of describing it is uh, College Board's legalese saying, this question does this. Um, Now, I don't totally agree with the second bullet, and I'll explain why in just a second. But again, skip and come back if it seems difficult. Look for ways to earn partial credit. That's the one I'm going to focus in on a lot of. Know how to use all the methods on the Java quick reference sheet. Again, going back to that reference sheet, the students at this point should be very familiar with it. So reading through the FRQ, they need to read through it and find out first off how many parts they're going to actually answer. Is it just A or is it A, B, C? But one of the things also, and this is always noted somewhere in there, if they are writing a method in part A, there is a very good chance they're going to have to make a call to that method in part B. That's one of the ways of earning that partial credit. Even if they don't write A, but they work on B and they actually make a correct call to that method that was written in part A, they will earn extra credit from there. So the way I teach my kids is you will answer every question. You just may not answer all of every question. We're looking at getting as much partial credit as possible. We want to, again, read through the FRQ. Don't spend a whole lot of time. Know about how much time you have for each one, and then pace yourself out. Now, things to earn partial credit. Creating a method header. If it's one of the questions where you're actually writing methods, if they can just get the method header correctly, that's typically a point. If they can correctly return a value, even if their calculation may not be totally correct, but they're returning the correct value, that's it. On class creation, if they can actually create the correct instance variables with the correct types, that will get them some points. So this are ways to get the partial credit on some of the stuff. Now, when it comes to the FRQs, more than likely, they're not writing more than about 10 to 15 lines of code for each segment. Rarely is there anything more than that. Now, when I'm talking lines, I'm not including the curly brackets. I'm talking just strict commands. Most of the time, they're doing about 5 to 7 lines, but at most, you'll have about 15. So something I tell my students is if you're writing more than 15 lines, go back and reread, make sure you're answering it correctly. Let's see. Partial credit. Definitely if they're struggling on a question, maybe they've got the header down, but they don't know how to write it. Move on. Because if they get stuck and they get bogged down too long, that's time wasted that they'll never get back. Same goes with the multiple choice questions. If they get bogged down, you just need to tell them, pause, move on, and then come back to it. With this FRQs, there are certain things that the students need to know going in. They will not get penalized if they use length instead of size or size instead of length, or they forget the parentheses at the end of length. There are certain things that the readers are looking for. They're looking more at the overall logic and not at the correctness of the Java code. So there is some leeway in how they actually score points. And that's something I've always told my students is, I'm looking for the actual logic. Did you understand you needed to loop? The loop needs to end at this specific point and you need to check this value. Beyond that, the FRQs are pretty straightforward, but it's one of the things where you want to pretty much work through them. We'll give you some stuff on actually how to do some FRQ practice in just a second. Are we good at this point? Any questions per se?
We do have one question, but I think you might be getting to this later. Joseph asked, besides the posted previous AP exams on my AP classroom, what other resources or previous practice exams do you recommend?
Okay, I'll go through some of that in just a second.
Okay.
So review resources. Definitely Code HS has two separate courses. You have the Nitro and the Mocha course. You have the AP CSA review course. It's something I use for my students practice once we're done with everything. And I'll probably be done with the whole thing in another week and a half. We're on spring break, but when we come back, I have got about a week and a half. And the last unit, recursion, I really only cover for 2 days. I just show them how to trace through the recursion. We don't worry about anything else. If you're not doing the AP question of the day, you definitely need to. And the nice thing there is they're individual questions. They can be great warm-ups every day. You can always go back in previous days because they have the full group since they started for the whole school year. So you can always go back and view that. And then, of course, the AP CSA FRQ Center. So again, these are Code HS resources, definitely worth doing. Again, look at the review course. What you can do there is if you currently have a CSA Nitro or Mocha course, you can open up the CSA review course and actually add the units from there into your current one. So your students don't have to actually populate into another one. You could just add these whole units and then they can go from there. The Code HS practice is something else I always use. I use the practice at the end of first semester just to review iteration, conditional statements, using and writing classes, and then we'll do some of it intermixed with the review course to cover arrays, array lists, 2D arrays, and go from there. Now, so again, let me go to the hub real quick and I can show you what the hub looks like. Screen, and so the Code HS hub, these are the resources you can do. So like, yeah, the Nitro course, the Mocha course, and the Latte. You can create your own by blending that stuff, but this is the CSA thing. You've got the tutorials. You can go through the question of the day. If you're not looking at them, definitely utilize this. Have your students do it as a warm-up. Definitely look through the review course. Definitely some great questions in there to actually do it. There is a Code HS textbook. If you look at the sidebar in Code HS, the students can get access to the textbook and read from there. Let's see, but that's the CSA prep stuff. Let's see what else we got. Testimonials and blogs, and I'll go back to that. So let's go back to our slides. Now, the Nitro and Mocha courses are pretty much the same. I use the Nitro. I was using the Mocha. Nitro is a little more up to date with what the current CSA CED standards are. So it kind of follows the current CED. The Mocha is a little older, but it's still pretty much the same thing. The big difference between the two is when College Board made the change to the inheritance unit. They pulled some of the stuff out. That stuff's in Nitro. I don't believe it's in Mocha. But again, either one, most of the rest of the materials are the same for everything else. Okay, the review course, again, they took 20 hours, so about a month of review. Uh, definitely worth a look. Definitely worth utilizing, specifically if you're at that point where you're near the end of April and you just want to make sure you've gone over everything, just add those units to your Code HS course and you should be good to go. CSA practice, I use this a lot. This is how I handle some extra credit. So in other words, they get points from my class by completing the actual exercises. I will tell you one thing, if you have the Pro Edition, turn off copy and paste. Or else they'll be copying answers from all over the place from each other, and they'll just do it. If you turn off copy and paste, at least they have to type it in. And as they're typing in, hopefully some of that knowledge is actually sinking into their heads. Question of the day, again, great. We were using it every day until the question of the day was actually a couple of days ahead of where we were in our lessons. So we stopped using it, but we will go back and start using them now since we're almost done because I think their questions of the day is close to being a review now of what getting ready for the actual one. But with the question of the day, you can always go back to previous days and review even more. The FRQ Center, very useful. A lot of FRQs out there. Some of these are actually from College Board. I think some are even ones that have been created by other teachers and content creators. So definitely worth utilizing, specifically if you need to focus on FRQs. My son, who also teaches computer science, he spends about 2 weeks once they're done focusing on FRQ practice. That's all they do. So they're doing it, and they'll do some of the things that we're going to look at in a second. So again, you've got the FRQs here in Code HS. They can run them. They can do individual assignments and go from there. The nice thing with the FRQs and with Code HS is Code HS is very much focused on writing code. That's where the practice questions that they've got for each unit. I would definitely utilize those with each unit if you can, just so they get that whole combination of reading and writing code. Now, there are a few groups you can join. The AP, if you're an AP teacher, you're probably already part of the AP community. If not, you can just go back to your AP Central connection and join the community. If you're do social media, of course, the AP Facebook group. Code HS has their educators group, and along with the educators Facebook group. Now, some CSA exam strategies. If you spend, again, they don't need to review. They really do need to review. I was surprised at my last test how much we've been focusing on arrays, array lists, and 2D arrays, that they forgot some of the basic fundamentals of writing classes. So we're on the inheritance unit, and they pretty much forgot how to do some of this. So they need to understand that. So definitely is a way to do it. If you want to, if you can do it as extra credit, that's fine. But definitely try to get them actually practicing some more. It doesn't have to be the same kind of stuff, but again, maybe focus like every other day. Maybe one day is, or a few days is multiple choice. Maybe a couple days working through FRQ. Okay, a few ideas. Extra credit. Again, definitely extra credit. It gets the buy-in. My students are waiting for their extra credit because their grades are not that great. But again, this is what we're dealing with. You can turn some of the things into coding projects, which is kind of what my son does. So you can make these little coding projects where they get starter code and the solution code. You've got those set up in Code HS, and they can just go through it and do them. I would actually suggest even working through pair programming on FRQs. That way they get different student point of views, maybe switch up the pair programming so they can see how somebody else would write the code, and they can kind of get better ideas. But that's FRQ Unit 4, longest streak. Then we've got another one for FRQ Unit 6, payroll. So they, again, Code HS has the student handouts. They've got the solution code, so you've got the answers and you can review it. Now, quizzes, you can put stuff on the quizzes. You can have some competitions. You could probably also do similar things with Kahoot, Gimkit, all the other little quiz things that are out there. Very useful. The one thing I found a little bit difficult for this is just the amount of time it takes to answer some questions. Sometimes quizzes in these, they may not give them enough time to actually be legitimate. Whiteboard FRQs. My son does this. I'm going to be doing it this year. If you have multiple whiteboards or even just a large whiteboard, you can set up different sides where you have your two teams and somebody goes up, they write a line of code. The next person on the team goes up and adds a new line or removes a line. So it's definitely like a relay event. You're working it that way where they can do one of the following and work through it. And then they can, if you get it right, where you've got 2 or 3 whiteboards, or even if they've got small ones, they can pass them around. They can go from there and actually work through this. So AP CSU review strategies you use. I hope Robin's not too upset with what I'm going to say, but I don't just use Code HS for my review. There are other things I definitely utilize. If you are not or don't use it, Runestone Academy's CS Awesome, they have timed tests so they can actually practice taking a test online. They have untimed tests so they can get more questions. They have most of the FRQs that College Board has released. This is one of the big things. If you're looking for questions for multiple choice, there are a lot of options out there. Code HS has a ton with the practice and actually the review course. along with CS Awesome, which has a lot of questions for each unit. And they also have a bunch of questions for review. I think they've got like 3 or 4 practice tests that can actually go in. So there's a lot that you can actually utilize from there. Beyond that, there's other resources that I'm not using. I've looked at the code.org CSA course. I was not thrilled with it. I won't, their questions and stuff are not the greatest. I think they're just playing catch up with everybody else. Project STEM from Amazon Future Engineer. If you've got theirs, they do have some good questions. They just don't have a lot of review material. So again, you're actually going to be going back. So again, utilizing Code HS, and if you can utilize CS Awesome, that will pretty much cover a huge chunk for actually preparing. Now, do you guys have anything you want to bring up to the group that we can actually see when it comes to your strategies?
That would be cool. Yeah, if you guys want to type in the chat and let us know what you do, what strategies you use, we can learn off of each other. Chip, I do have some questions for you while they're typing into the chat.
Okay.
Someone asked, besides turning off copy and paste, what other techniques do you use to get students not to cheat on the online problems?
Well, I definitely turn off copy and paste. And when I do that, they just they go crazy. They get mad at me. And I was just like, listen, I need your work. This has been the biggest issue we've had, which is dealing with students submitting work that's not their own. Luckily, Code HS is good about, or at least I've reported some issues where I've seen solutions posted online. I've let Code HS know, and they've gone and reported those to the actual website administration. They've had them taken down. Uh, but it's just going to be something you have to fight with. AP or artificial intelligences, they're another issue, but what you need to be aware is that um, best way is we understand how students talk. So if you're a language arts teacher and somebody used an AI to produce something or they copied it, it's words they don't uh normally use in everyday speech. And the same thing goes with programming. There are certain things that we don't teach. And then when it shows up, it's like, yeah, that's not what I showed you. Where'd you come up with that? So it's really getting to understand your students' coding style, what you've actually shown them. I had an incident about 4 years ago where one of my lower achieving students submitted something in Code HS, and I'm looking at it and it's like, it worked. And then I'm looking at some other ones in the because I mean you can have everything auto graded. I would definitely recommend not doing that. Set some, and most of the stuff in Code HS has at least 1 or 2 lessons in a unit that are teacher graded, so you can go through. And when I saw the second one that was almost the exact same code, I just pretty much took the code, searched it on Google, and I found the website. And then just, went to the students like, explain please how this works. If you understand your code, you can explain it. If you teach CSP, it's kind of the same thing with the create task. They have to explain what they wrote. So here I was just trying to, it's like, okay, well, I'm not giving you credit for it. Yeah, gallery walks are good. Definitely what you really want students to focus in on is being able to read code. And it's what I have my students do is I've been doing this for over 40 years with coding. I've got a huge encyclopedia of algorithms in my head, and it's getting them to build up that collection of algorithms. So the more they see others do it as to how they do it, they can then do it. And this is the best time for them to, look at somebody else's code, but try to understand it. There's certain debugging techniques that actually help with some of this. I don't know how many of you are aware of the explain it to the duck. You have these little rubber ducks and you just kind of put it there and it's like, okay, explain it to the duck. And they have to go line by line. Typically, when they're debugging, if they're explaining it line by line, they can find their problem. The same thing can go if they're reading somebody else's code. Just read through it, but try to explain it in English line by line. Again, you want them to get that whole concept of literacy. Anything else?
Yeah, we had somebody mention Go Guardian. I actually used to have that in my school and I loved it. It was amazing, but then they got rid of it. So if anybody knows about Go Guardian, it does monitor students' screens. You can lock them down in a certain spot. You can type them a message. That was my favorite. I'd type, "What are you doing?" or something
Yeah, I
like
mean, there's a lot of things like we use land school. Land school allows us to actually set our own little firewalls, block it. So they can go to Code HS. Um, and something like this, the biggest issue is, you know, them emailing or texting somebody their answers. So maybe you can turn off their email if you can. For us, since their email is their access to the world, there's that account is what gets them into everything. I can't do that. It's really just teacher monitoring is the best thing you can do. The best
that.
monitoring is what you got.
Yeah, if you do have the pro version of Code HS, we do have some plagiarism tools. We actually have a whole suite of tools that you could look at. It's called Academic Integrity Center. So if you do have pro, you can go ahead and look for that in your navigation bar on the side. Um, Somebody asked, do you assign the practice modules by adding it to your Nitro, or do you just ask them to complete it? If so, how do you know they've completed each practice module?
Okay, if you actually assign them as separate units in your Nitro course, you can actually see how much they've done, which is what I do. So I'll actually take each one of those things and assign them as separate units. Um, I believe it's under, I don't remember how I do it now, because I only do it once a semester. But I had them as separate units. And one of the features when it comes to plagiarism checking, I do use with Code HS is I will actually look at the student's code history and go through each time it's saved and ran and see how the code changed over time. If like in 1 second there was no code there, and then like all of a sudden they've got perfect code in the next one, okay, that's a big red flag. And that's part of the what CodeHS has done with some of their AI things with checking for plagiarism. They're looking at the changes over time. Um, let's see. Yeah, I know you can do the practices as separate units because that's what I always do. I just don't remember off the top of my head how to add them in, but it's typically like you add in things. I don't remember if it's part of the supplemental at the bottom or you have to go somewhere else and actually add them. But you can definitely add them.
And then somebody asked, will Code HS ever have a lockdown browser? We actually do have something now. It's called Focus Mode. And again, it's part of that academic integrity suite where you can lock students into a particular area on Code HS, but it wouldn't prevent them from just going to other websites. But if they're on Code HS working on something that you don't want them to be, you can, if you're going through an assignment, at the front of the room and you want them to pay attention, you can put them into focus mode. So that's the closest thing that we have right now.
Yeah, if you do focus mode, you turn off copy and paste. That's going to help a bunch because if they have to type it and if they've got it somewhere else, at least they're typing and they're hopefully understanding it a little bit more. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So we have our AP resources, just to recap, the AP CSA Hub, the course review course, the FRQ Center, the question of the day, and of course, the practice questions. And I'll turn it over to Robin.
All right. So Chip did talk about like our Facebook group for educators and also for AP. You can also, if you look onto CodeHS's website, you can become a certified educator. You can earn micro credentials. We've got various social media, and we're actually going to be having applications come out soon if you are interested in being a teacher trainer, which is what CHIP is, where you would be able to share your knowledge and expertise with other teachers around the world. And if you could go to the next slide, I did put this link in the chat already. As you know, based on this, we do have many free PD opportunities, and we're going to be adding some more throughout the summer and up through back to school. And here is just a list of some of them that are coming up if you're interested. And you would just go to the website or the link that I put in the chat. And then the next slide is about our virtual conference that we have coming up. And I put that in the chat as well. If you're interested in attending this, it's totally free. And we have teachers and we have experts in the field and we have Code HS people all giving various workshops. We have things like listening to students' voice and an elementary and an AP. And I think there's one other track that you could get on, but you can definitely take a look at that. You get a Pro trial. If you haven't used Pro before or you haven't gotten a free Pro trial before, you would get that. A gift card for attending and also a digital swag bag. I'm excited to see what might be in the digital swag bag. So if you want to know what's in there, you got to register and then show up for the event. And then the last thing, if you would for us, is to complete our workshop survey. And our workshop survey just gives us information on how to provide you with better workshops. And let me type that into the chat for you. / workshop survey. Hopefully this works for you. And this is a very short survey, so it should only take you a minute. Okay, I think I got it in there right. There it is. Pro is amazing. Yes. When I was teaching and I didn't have Pro, I was like, it's okay if I don't have Pro, it just gives you the faster grading, but I can sit here and go through all of this. It's totally fine. But now that I work for the company and I see everything that comes with Pro, I should have pushed harder, I guess, to try and get it. And of course, a lot of new things have come out just like in the last year. The whole Academic Integrity Center is brand new.
Well, having access to the full grade book where you can see all the grades in one separate thing. That was one of the big things we wanted.
Yeah, it's so different when you have Pro to be able to see the grades like that. It's so much easier. So yeah, if you can talk to your administrator or whoever's in charge and try to get that, it would be awesome. But if you don't have it and you want to try it out, go ahead and register for that virtual teacher conference and you will get it. So I'm not sure how long they give
I think
it
it's
to you
through
for.
June. I think
Through
the
June.
Pro's through June. Yeah.
Yeah, at least you can check it out and see what you're missing and maybe decide how hard you want to push for it. But it is very awesome. So I don't want to keep you any longer than 4:45. So Chip did an amazing job of ending perfectly to give you guys some time to look through these links and also to fill out the survey. And of course, if you want to sign up for any more free PD, that link was in there as well. But when you guys are all done, you're free to go. I do have some more questions, Chip, so we're going to hang out for just a little bit.
Sure.
While everybody's filling that out. But once you're done, thank you so much for coming. You can head out or you can listen to some of these questions and how Chip's going to answer them. Let's see. It says, what do you typically teach or assign after the AP exam? And what is your last day of school?
Well, down in the southeast part of the country, we get out early. I mean, our last day is it's a Friday. It's always the Friday of Memorial Day weekend. So I've only got like 2 weeks afterwards. But typically afterwards, what I'll do is we'll do Minecraft. We'll do Minecraft education. Those that have experience programming with Python, we'll actually teach them a little bit of working with the agent, and they'll program the agent to do certain things. Once they realize they can script some of the stuff they do manually in Minecraft, they actually enjoy it.
That was all the questions. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to type them in. We'll hang out for just a couple of minutes. But thank you so much again for coming. We appreciate you being here and we appreciate the feedback you've given us on the survey.